Welcome to Written Words, and today I am out and about. I'm at the moment at the beautiful village of Norton Disney, which you can probably just see from the sign behind me, and I'm going to go on a little drive around Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire, and I'm going to explore some telephone box libraries. So come with me and have a look and see what we can find. Our first stop on our tour is the village of Norton Disney, which is on the boundary between Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire. As the name suggests, it does indeed have links with Walt Disney, as it was the ancestral home of the Disney family. The phone box library is right in the centre of the village outside the pub, and it was even decorated with fairy lights, which were switched off at the time I visited, but I did wonder whether someone comes and switches them on at night time. We move on now to Cromwell, which is a very quiet village just off the very busy A1. When I found the phone box, I found it was being used to house a defibrillator, which is another common use for old phone boxes. And there were no books inside. However, as I walked back up the main street, I discovered the village residents had used the much more spacious bush shelter to house their well-stocked library. Some sheep in a nearby field were curious about what I was doing wandering around their village and poking around in the phone box and the bush shelter, and they had quite a lot to say when they discovered I hadn't brought them anything to eat. Crossing back over to the other side of the A1 is East Markham. The bright sunshine and the blue sky were perfect for taking photos on the day I arrived in East Markham, although it was very cold and icy and the roads were treacherous and I had to drive very carefully. Not far from East Markham, on the way to Retford, is the village of Askham. And the telephone box in Askham is directly opposite a beautiful church, the Church of St Nicholas, with its impressive lich gate and its rather special clock, which my West Yorkshire followers will be interested to learn was made in Ilkley. The phone box and the post box are nestled together in an ivy-covered niche, and the phone box houses a neatly arranged collection of books, magazines and local notices, as well as the ever-present defibrillator. Moving back over the border from Nottinghamshire into Lincolnshire and heading towards the city of Lincoln, we come across the village of Doddington, and the village is dominated by the impressive Doddington Hall, and its farm shop and cafe were a welcome stop on my travels. The phone box is just around the corner from the hall, and given its location on a busy route into Lincoln, as well as its very large selection of books which were absolutely crammed into the phone box, I wondered whether this might be one of the more frequented phone box libraries. Going round Lincoln and slightly to the north, we arrive at the village of Ingham, which, according to the signs as you enter, is officially Lincolnshire's best kept village. And it's not far from RAF Scampton, which was the former home of the Red Arrows. They've now moved to another airbase in the region. And I saw them practicing in the sky as I was driving along. The phone box is on the edge of a vast village green. And of all the phone box libraries, this was probably the most tightly packed with books. So much so that a sign inside said, "Please do not leave books on the floor. If there is no room on the shelves, do not leave books." Which is a little reminder that these libraries are not just for clearing out your clutter. Bring books, but also take some home with you and enjoy them. And the last phone box on my trip, as I approached home, was the village of Kexby. If you happen to be driving through Kexby, this one is very easy to miss, as it isn't on the main road. So turn down Westgate and then right onto the high street, where the phone box stands on a tiny triangular green with a convenient bench next to it. The phone box libraries are not just a pretty sight, but they also function as a kind of community hub. Many of them, in addition to books, have notice boards with local information on them, as well as the ever-present defibrillator. They're especially popular in rural areas like Lincolnshire, where many of the smaller public libraries are facing closure at the moment. Of course, I didn't go on my trip empty-handed. I took a bag of books with me, which I shared out among the various libraries that I visited. And I also left a copy of A Month of Writing Ideas in each phone box that I visited. The white copies are some that I had printed for some of the shows that I did over the summer. But the purple copy version, the contents are the same, is also available to purchase online. If you go to the website at writtenwords.uk, you will find a link to buy that. It would make a very good Christmas present for any writer in your life, or indeed a treat for yourself. So those are just a few of the phone box libraries in my area. I did have a list of over 30 phone boxes that I could have visited, but it just wasn't possible to visit them all in one day, as Lincolnshire is a very large place. However, I am sure I will be visiting some of the others in the future too. And as well as dropping off books in the libraries, I also did give in to temptation a few times and brought a few books home with me. I came home with 4 books, most of them classics that I haven't read yet, so I will be enjoying North and South, The Moon and Sixpence, Hamlet. I'm going to be doing some exploring of Shakespeare in the near future, and Wolf Brother by Michelle Paver. I've read a couple of Michelle Paver's adult books, and this is one of her children's books which I've been quite keen to read. So those are some of the little phone box libraries in my area. Do you have any little community libraries in your area where people exchange books? Do feel free to share your pictures and stories of little libraries in the comments. Moving on now to a text for this lesson. I came across a very appropriate book called The Telephone Box Library by Rachael Lucas. And the blurb of the book says this: "The Cotswolds, the perfect retreat for a stressed-out teacher, and Lucy has found just the right cottage for a bargain rent. All she has to do is keep an eye on Bunty, her extremely feisty 90-something neighbour. With her West Highland Terrier Hamish on her side, Lucy plans to relax and read up on the women of nearby Bletchley Park. But the villagers of Little Maudley have other ideas, and she finds herself caught up in the campaign to turn a dilapidated telephone box into a volunteer-run library. Along the way, she makes friends with treehouse designer Sam and finds herself falling for the charms of village life. And it seems Bunty has a special connection to Bletchley Park and the telephone box, one that she's kept secret for decades." So I was intrigued to find out more about this story and learn about Lucy's experiences in the Cotswolds with the phone box. So let's have a little peep inside and take a look at a small passage from the beginning of the book where Lucy first sees the phone box. A faded red telephone box stood at the edge of the green, its once cherry red livery now a dull washed-out pink. One of the panes of glass had a spider's web of cracks, and several others were missing altogether. Lucy peered inside and grimaced. It smelt utterly disgusting. Even the weeds that had grown through the broken glass looked as if they were trying to escape. It was the only neglected-looking thing she could see in the village. Flowers poured in a rainbow of tasteful colour from window boxes, and lavender hedges edged neatly trimmed lawns. So when she first encounters the phone box, it's not in a great state of repair, something that is familiar from my travels. Most of the phone box libraries that I visited have been adopted by the local community. Of course, in our digital age with mobile phones and internet, we don't have a need for them as telephone boxes anymore. So the communities have repurposed their phone boxes. However, there are still plenty more that are standing, looking like this one that Lucy's found, derelict and in need of some love. Let's take a look at how Rachael Lucas has used description in this episode. In my earlier videos about adjectives and descriptions, we talked about how adjectives are useful for description, but there are other ways to describe as well. And Rachael Lucas has done that here too. So first of all, let's see if we can find some adjectives in the extract. There are some colours mentioned. There is red, there is cherry red, and there is washed out pink. Cherry red and washed out pink are different shades of red, and the shades tell us something about the phone box. The fact that it used to be cherry red, which is a bright colour, and it's now a washed out pink, tells us that now it's not looking as beautiful as it once did. Then we're told about the smell, which was disgusting, another adjective. And we're told that the phone box is neglected looking. So we've got some quite negative adjectives there. We've got a dull, washed out pink, we've got disgusting, and we've got neglected looking. And that contrasts with the tasteful colour from the window boxes and the lavender hedges and the neatly trimmed lawns. So she's using adjectives, but she's using contrast as well. Contrast can be a very powerful way of conveying a message. And we can certainly feel that here. We can feel how different the phone box is compared to the rest of the village. It doesn't fit in somehow. Another technique used by the author here is to use different senses. There are 5 senses in total, and this is only a very tiny passage. So to cram in all 5 senses into one tiny little extract would be too much. It would seem overloaded. It would feel like the author was trying too hard. So mostly we're told about what Lucy can see. We're told about colours, which we see. And she describes the visual appearance of the phone box and the village. But she also includes another sense. She includes the sense of smell. And the smell of the phone box was utterly disgusting. So more negativity. But this time coming through the nose, not through the eyes. So it's using another angle. And in some places, she almost uses personification too. For example, the weeds looked as if they were trying to escape. So Lucy's mind starts to imagine that the weeds have a mind of their own and they're trying to escape from this disgusting phone box. And later on, the flowers that are pouring out of the window boxes, again, as if they're animate and they're spilling out as if they're moving, which helps again to bring the writing to life in another way. Staying with this extract for our language focus, I'm going to take a closer look at the sentence structure, and we're going to see how the author has varied the sentence structure to keep the writing interesting and make it more fun to read. First of all, let's look at a slightly modified version of this. I've slightly modified this extract to a way it could have been written, and then we'll compare it to the actual text and see what the difference is and why the original version is much better. So here is my modified version. As she approached the green, Lucy noticed a faded red telephone box, its once cherry red livery now a dull washed out pink. She saw that one of the panes of glass had a spider's web of cracks, and several others were missing altogether. As she peered inside, she grimaced. It smelled utterly disgusting. She noted that the weeds that had grown through the broken glass looked as if they were trying to escape. It was the only neglected-looking thing she could see in the village. All around her she could see tastefully coloured flowers in window boxes and lavender hedges around neatly trimmed lawns. So at first glance, this is not a horrendous piece of writing. It's grammatically accurate. It uses a variety of vocabulary. It describes an interesting scene. But when we look more closely, we find that, first of all, 2 of the sentences begin with as she. The first one says, as she approached. The third sentence says, as she peered inside. The second sentence begins with she saw. The fourth sentence begins she noted. And then the final 2 sentences don't begin with she, but the subject of the sentence is she. It was the only neglected looking thing she could see in the village. All around her, she could see tastefully coloured flowers. So all the way through this version, the subject of the sentence is she. Now let's go back to the original. But on this slide, I've arranged the sentences one underneath another in bullet points so that it's easier to compare them. The first thing we notice by looking at this is that every sentence begins differently. None of them start with the same word or phrase. Secondly, before we even read the sentences, we can see that their lengths are different. Some are shorter, some are longer. And then, looking at each sentence in turn, we can see that the subject of the sentence is different. In our modified extract, the subject of every sentence was Lucy, was she. But in the first sentence here, the subject is the telephone box. A faded red telephone box stood. Although technically we're still looking through Lucy's eyes, the language has been adapted. She has used the phone box as the subject of the sentence. In the second sentence, the subject is the panes of glass. We're not told Lucy saw the panes of glass, but we're told the panes of glass were like spiders' webs. Some of the panes of glass were missing. So the subject of the sentence is the panes of glass. The third sentence has Lucy as the subject. So we're brought back again to Lucy, just to remind us that it is Lucy that we're talking about, and we are looking at the scene through Lucy's eyes, and in this sentence, through Lucy's nose too. The next sentence, the weeds are the subject of the sentence. The weeds had grown, and they looked like they were trying to escape. The sentence after that were brought back to Lucy. It was the only neglected looking thing she could see. And then the final sentence, the subject shifts to the flowers and the lavender hedges. The flowers poured out of the boxes and the lavender hedges edged the neatly trimmed lawns. So of those 6 sentences, only 2 of them have Lucy as the subject. So as I said earlier about angles, this adds a different angle. The meaning is the same, but the writing is much more interesting this way. If you're uncertain about what I mean by the subject of the sentence, I did make an earlier video about subject, verb, object in sentences, and there is a link below to that video if you're interested in finding out more. And now for our writing prompt. Imagine you are visiting a little library, whether that's a real one that you know or whether it's a fictional one you've invented. You approach the library, you open the door and you take a look inside and you find something surprising. What do you find and what happens? Feel free to share your story in the comments below. I would be very interested to read where your imagination has taken you. As usual, there is a worksheet to accompany this lesson and all the other lesson videos, and those can be downloaded from the website at writtenwords.uk. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, happy writing!